The Persona series has some of the best symbolism when it comes to depicting villains in the form of a metaphysical world that acts as a parallel universe that moves alongside a normal school life, which the game uses to successfully weave a dance between the two to create a real, masterful piece of art with every entry. The series is a twist on Jungian ideas, notably creating game formats out of the ideas of personas and shadows that live inside of our own psyche. This game is actually superbly educational for psychology in terms of symbolism and the metaverse, to actually show the player how our hearts and minds actively deceive us when we believe we are seeking truth. I think we can gain a lot of value if we take a look at the villains in Persona 5, which is the persona I'm playing through while I create a series of videos on the characters of the main bosses from the game. To understand how Kamoshida came to be a villain, I would like to quickly explain how exactly a persona in a shadow is created, both in-game and in our lives. A persona is a metaphorical mask that we adorn in whatever situations we find ourselves in. These are the accepted aspects of ourselves that we integrate into our personality depending on the context that we require them in order to ensure our social and literal survival. In a way, personas and shadows are actually the same because the shadow is exactly the same thing, except it is an unconscious, rejected aspect of the self. You would think the villains, if they rejected this aspect of themselves, would just keep it under the surface and then choose to never act on it. The thing about shadows is that it is a trait that you are unaware of that exists in the subconscious of the mind. It is typically rejected by society, so we both hid it from the outside world and even ourselves. We become disfragmented when this happens though. For an example, maybe you can think of someone who struggles with asserting boundaries with the outside world or other aspects of their own life, and then burn out to the point of blowing up on others without even receiving a glimpse of knowing why. That's because at some point early on in an individual's life, they learned to repress this boundary setting when they were not allowed to use that aspect of themselves, and was rejected or punished for trying to use it. All of the villains in this game are the same way, with a narrative based from a core fear that they full sprint away from, and in the direction of said sprint, use it as fuel to chase a desire that is within their heart. So our main character here, Joker, sometimes I'll also refer to him as Ren, because that's how he's referred to outside of the game and in the wiki. When our character, Joker, first joins Shujin Academy, we see Kamoshida picking up a blonde girl, who we later learn is An, or if you're a cat or not a cat, I don't know, we call her Lady An. Seeming like a small event, we meet Ryuji, who becomes our first friend at Shujin, and first member of the Phantom Thieves. People are skeptical of our character Joker, and rumors begin to float around about us, calling us delinquents, juveniles, you know, as rumors can go when you hang out with the main rebel of the school. We learn very quickly about Kamoshida through Ryuji, educating us on Kamoshida being a perv, as well as saying that Kamoshida views the school as his castle. This unlocks the palace for Ryuji and Joker, aka Ren, which they're only able to see because of keywords spoken to unlock access to the metaverse. I think symbolically this shows us that Ren and Ryuji come to face the person underneath Kamoshida's mask, and they're only able to see Kamoshida's palace for this reason. In the palace we see how he views the school. We see that Kamoshida treats his students as slaves under hard punishment, sexualizes the students, and in particular, sees Lady An herself as his rightful queen. Ryuji and Ren are caught in the first entry to the palace, and Kamoshida's guards nearly kill Ryuji when our protagonist's persona, Arsene, awakens to rescue Ryuji. Later on, Ryuji's persona awakens as well when we confront Kamoshida a second time and nearly get obliterated. Ren and Ryuji activating their personas is them coming to terms with their shadow, accepting a rejected aspect of themselves, and using it in the name of justice, in the name of good. This is what makes Ren and Ryuji different from someone like Kamoshida, whose shadow runs rampant in his psyche without ever being in check. Using their personas, they escape the castle and are bewildered by the chain of events that have happened to them. When we return, Kamoshida at the school holds a ton of power. He has a front of caring about the students' well-being, which can quickly crumble when he feels like his position is threatened. Kamoshida teams up with the other staff members and teachers against his volleyball team, which obviously is unfair. He even goes to the extent of spiking the volleyball into Mishima's face, then plays it up to be an accident, which could be true in his conscious mind. But in the subconscious, Kamoshida does this in order to solidify himself as a head coach and remain a man in power. Here are some of the main events that happen in order to shine light on the shadow and dispel him through both of our awareness. Kamoshida holds Shiho on the volleyball team, who is close friends with Lady An from earlier. Kamoshida uses Shiho as blackmail to get closer to An in order to attempt to realize his views and desires that he holds for An. Ren overhears a conversation that An has on the phone with Kamoshida, where Kamoshida threatens to kick Shiho from the team if An doesn't come to Kamoshida's house, also implying that Kamoshida is going to take advantage of her when she comes to his home. Thankfully she doesn't. We go to lunch with An and comfort her, where eventually she stumbles into the palace alongside us and joins our team. Ryuji was making attempts to expose Kamoshida's harassment of the students, and Kamoshida, being threatened, needed to shut that down. He intentionally pushes Ryuji to the point of breaking his leg so he can't compete, then disbands the team, citing Ryuji as the person responsible for destroying the team in order to have his peers ignore him and turn against him, therefore using his power in order to protect himself from being dethroned. And lastly, Kamoshida sexually harasses Shiho, which drives her to attempt unalive. This sends Ren, Ryuji, and Mishima over the edge, who confront Kamoshida with what they know. Kamoshida makes fun of them and tells them he plans to expel them all next weekend. Kamoshida obviously does a lot more of this in the game, but here's just a few events that kind of give you an idea of what Kamoshida is doing and gives us insight into the character that's underneath Kamoshida that we eventually come to confront in the palace. When we do finally confront Kamoshida's shadow, his shadow transforms into its true manifestation, a giant pink six-limbed satyr who wears his crown, carries fine cutlery, and keeps his slaves in order with a crack of a whip. He has all the medals he's earned on the back of his cape, which he wears with pride, and is a staple of which justifies most of the actions he's taken. He speaks in a demeaning way, devours the female students from his main trophy to heal, and has volleyball players chained to his side that will attack for him. Symbolically, all of this reflects how his heart views the world and actions he has taken inside of the real world. Viewing himself as a massive dictator, he taunts the Phantom Thieves and flaunts the power he holds who he views as his slaves. While we progressively take out his distortions that assist him during the fight, eventually we can have a party member knock off his crown and win the battle. Kamoshida transforms back, and he attempts to flee with the crown, but having to make the choice to leap from the castle, similarly to the situation he put Shiho back in the real world, or face the wrath of the Phantom Thieves. We learn the truth in a very quick couple of lines that Kamoshida speaks. He felt forced into living up to expectations of him. Therefore, he became entitled to exercising his power in order to freely take from the students because he felt that he earned it. This leads me to talk about the tragedy of the Lustful King, Kamoshida, and what we can do in order to avoid becoming like him. Kamoshida's phrase leads me to believe that from his youth, the expectations mentioned, he let dictate what his decisions would or would not be, whether it be sourced from his parents, school, peers, or a mixture of all three and potentially more. We know that Kamoshida was a great athlete, but we don't know how much he actually enjoyed it compared to how much he enjoys his ego being gratified for his achievements. Expectations put a limitation on him, so once he achieved a position of power, he found that he could both live up to the expectations around him, yet exercise his power in order to satisfy his desires, and silence anyone who attempted to oppose his corrupt use of his position. He became progressively more comfortable with even sexually harassing students in his office, and taunting the students for having no evidence. Eventually he made the wrong enemies, the Phantom Thieves, which leads to his change of heart, and his confession in front of the whole entire student body of Shibuya. We do not owe anyone anything in this life. Not even our parents, nobody. But we must remember that every other individual also has the same right. When there are people in your life that place expectations onto you, that is their problem they need to handle if you do not choose to live up to them. Of course, there are consequences depending on the expectations you take on, so the choice isn't to actively avoid every single expectation put onto you in life. That would make you an extremely frustrating student or employee or anybody to try to work with. You just have to take on the right expectations. When you are able to push past inaccurate expectations of you though, and create a life that you can truly call yours in a position of power, this is when you are able to become a mentor, a guide, to show people who are similar to you the actions you took and the choices you made, in order to advise them into reaching your position quicker with the passing of the torch of sorts. This is the responsibility we hold when we step into positions of power, is to protect and guide our youth, and they will take care of us in turn. I feel if Kamoshida hadn't let his pride, lust, and fear take over his heart, that Kamoshida potentially could have become an amazing coach and would have become a force of good counsel rather than a man so heavily feared and despised. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I love you, and goodbye now.